Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics and the state legislature. I am your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and I'm excited today to be joined by a couple members of my team. We actually have this weird thing going on this week where we've got floor session every day and schedules are all over the place. And so Assemblymember Juan Alanis was going to join us from the Central Valley, and we had to move him around based on some scheduling conflicts. So when that happens, we're going to have some members of the team come and hang out with us and talk about some of the issues. So today we're welcoming our legislative aide, Enrique, and our assembly fellow, Sara. Thank you guys so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, we'll start real quickly. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Enrique, we'll start with you and Sara. Mm-hmm. And then I want to talk a little bit about the Capital Fellowship Program. Mm-hmm. Because you both, Sara, you currently are a part of the fellowship program. Enrique, you were previously part of the fellowship program.
Correct.
But I did want to highlight the program briefly so that people who might be interested in getting involved in Sacramento, the policy world, or getting their foot in the door for policy work, kind of know how to get involved in that. But Enrique, we'll start with you on just a little background.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my name is Enrique Govea, and thank you for having us. First of all, it's really exciting. I was born in San Jose, California, moved to Mexico when I was about 3 months old. My family relocated to Mexico, moved back to the States, and have lived in Fremont since 9 years old, up until 25 when I moved to Sacramento for an internship program that I was able to participate on a visitor status at Sac State through my home campus, San Jose State.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really excited to be here.
Wonderful. Awesome. How about you, Sara? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So thank you as well for having us both. This is very, very cool experience. So my name is Sara Marshall, and I'm from Shingle Springs, California. If you're familiar with the Sacramento area, it's just, about an hour or so away, depending on traffic.
It's a long commute, though.
It is. I'm currently living there, so I am having quite the commute each morning, but it's a good time to listen to podcasts, your podcast, listen to music, take phone calls.
Providing content right here.
Yes. I've moved around a little bit growing up. I'm back in Shingle Springs now, but college sort of took me to DC for a little while. And then ultimately down in LA, where I graduated from Azusa Pacific University. And there I studied public relations.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So from there is when I applied to the fellowship and, ultimately landed in your office for the Assembly Fellowship.
And we're very lucky and excited to have you. And actually, we've never hosted an Assembly Fellow before, at least since I've been elected, but had the opportunity over the years to work with a lot of fellows. And it's just, I have such great respect for the program. So we'll do it in two parts, and I'll ask Sara, I'll ask you about your experience. But first, Enrique, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the fellowship program is? And tell me why it was helpful for you in getting your career going.
Absolutely. That is a great question. So the Assembly Fellowship Program, or the Assembly Fellowship Program, I'll backtrack a little, is an option of the Capital Fellows Program as a whole. There are 4 options that fellows can participate as far as the program. The Assembly and the Senate are 2 programs within the Capital Fellows Program that allows participants to work in the legislature, so directly either with a member office or with a committee or for the caucus for a Republican applicant. And it's essentially a way for somebody to dive deep into the legislative process. The fellowship allows the participant to work for a full legislative session.
Yeah.
So it's a great experience for somebody who wants to experience what it's like to work in the building or in a legislative setting, while diving headfirst and really learning by doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's essentially what made me interested to apply to the fellowship program. As I mentioned earlier in my introduction, I was fortunate to join an internship program in 2020. Unfortunately, though, I joined that internship program the year that COVID occurred, which you may or may not have heard of that.
It's a tough year to be.
It caught many by surprise.
Into the workforce, for
absolutely,
sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think, value came out of that as well, which I'm happy to get into later on. But yeah, I joined the internship in 2020, and I was only able to intern with then Assemblyman Jay Obernolte for about 2 months
Okay.
before
yeah.
the legislature adjourned, the state went on lockdown, and some of my peers in the internship program were able to stay in their office working remotely. That wasn't an option in my office, unfortunately. So going back to San Jose State after that experience, I learned about the Capital Fellows program during my time as an intern, and one of the first things I did returning to San Jose State is, how can I, begin taking the steps to learn more about this program, to apply.
Yeah.
So I consulted with appropriate faculty in the political science department, applied around mid to late last year. I forget when the application cycle was, but I was fortunate enough to work for Assemblymember Joe Patterson last session.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you were a fellow for Assemblyman Joe Patterson, who is a regular guest on this podcast as well. So we love having Joe on. And I think the experience obviously led you to our office, where you're now a full-fledged legislative staffer, or legislative aide in our office, and we're very lucky to have you. But that really is what it is. The fellowship program, at least in my mind, is, because I actually started as an intern as well many, many years ago. This was back in 2011 or something like that. But that is generally an unpaid, almost volunteer experience, right? Right. Where you're gaining valuable knowledge, but it's usually for a very short period of time, maybe 2 or 3 months. But the fellowship is an opportunity for you to get a year basically being a legislative staffer, getting paid a stipend, and actually getting to see the process. And I think a lot of people come out of that wanting to stay in the policy field and in California politics and policy.
Absolutely.
And can pursue a career either in the building as a staffer in the legislature, or outside of the building doing advocacy work. But it's really a great opportunity to do that. And so I think, and then some people decide, this isn't really for me, which I totally understand.
Which is still a learning opopportunity, maybe some people think that it's something they may have high interest for, and then to actually get in there and maybe it's not for me,
So, Sara, tell us a little about how your experience has been so far. Obviously, Enrique has kind of experienced his fellowship has ended and he's now working in the building. But what has your experience been so far, and how has the fellowship program helped you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty incredible experience thus far. A big part of what attracted me to the program is that I don't have any prior experience in sort of the political arena. So my degree is in public relations, which is really media heavy and sort of marketing adjacent. So still a lot of reading and writing and presenting, a lot of those communication skills that you can pull on, but very limited political experience. When I was at school out in DC, I went to a school called the George Washington University very briefly. And there I was sort of pursuing political science. But other than that year that I was out in DC, I really turned more towards the communication space. So a lot of the experience has been about being able to take those skills that I've learned previously and see if I can apply them in a political policy-driven area. I've always been really passionate about politics and policy, and that's another huge component that drew me to this program. But the experience, as I said, has been pretty incredible. There's really nothing like it, at least I haven't heard of anything being similar, offering the same opportunity, the level of experience being brought on. As you said, to be basically a legislative aide, being trusted to take on responsibilities, being trusted to apply your, previous skill set and interest in a way that really contributes to the team. Yes, that public relations background is helpful, but you have to have an interest in public service. Yeah. And so to be able to see that interest and that passion for myself sort of live out in this space. And yes, it helps that you get a stipend and that it is a paid opportunity. So you're able to sort of for some fellows support themselves off
Right.
of that and make it a worthwhile experience. It makes it a more accessible opportunity because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, being able to see public service and communication and policy sort of live out in a career opportunity is, pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think it's important too about the program to note that really, I think people from all different backgrounds, all different degrees can apply, right? You need a bachelor's degree to apply for the program. So most people apply, or some people apply coming out of the college, like coming out of their bachelor's program. Other people will apply many, many years later, wanting to do a career change or something like that. There's no like age limit in terms of how old you can be, but you can apply from a lot of different backgrounds. And I think for policy in California, we don't just need people with policy backgrounds or political science backgrounds. Like we also need people with business backgrounds and agriculture backgrounds and other areas of expertise.
Absolutely.
To really, because we address as a legislature all of those different issues every year, right? So I think it's really cool that there's really no limit to who can be in the fellowship program or who can apply. And you can really and so it kind of creates for some diversity, right?
I agree. I agree.
background.
To your point of the state and the many issues that are existing in here, I think many people of different backgrounds definitely have something to offer.
Yeah.
As it pertains not only to the fellowship program but public policy here in general.
Well, same goes for legislators too, by the way. So we have a lot of legislators with a lot of different backgrounds, but everyone brings like a unique perspective, and it's really important. So anyone's interested in this, again, the requirements are pretty simple. You need a bachelor's degree. But I would suggest Googling Capital Fellows Program. It's administered by Sacramento State University. So if you go to Sacramento State's website, they've got more information on how to apply and things like that. But certainly something that for any prospective people looking to get into the policy sector, an amazing foot in the door. And Sara, to your point, it's very unique in terms of an opportunity. You don't really see this kind of opportunity in other areas. There is some stuff in DC, obviously, that I'm sure some programs that are offered, but it's pretty unique for a policy opportunity. So let's get in. If you guys want to stick around, we'll get into the recap of the last week's events. Don't have a ton here, but I did want to bring up a couple stories. The first big one that I don't know, I was just kind of blown away by was In-N-Out announced the closure of their first ever restaurant in Oakland. They've never in their history, they've relocated some stores in the past, but they've never in their history closed the store. Mostly because why would you close an In-N-Out? I mean, it is one of the most profitable business models in California. I don't know about you guys, but the In-N-Out in my neighborhood has a line around the block.
Oh, does it?
Until like 1 a.m. every day.
The past week or two, I'm sure. Have you tried getting yourself some In-N-Outs?
I'm there quite often. Yes, I am. Definitely. Are you, Enrique, now, are you an In-N-Out fan? Like, will you go to In-N-Out?
I'll have me some In-N-Out. I'll have me some In-N-Out. I will say for the viewers out there, full discretion, and it is a joke in the office, but I am vegetarian. I will say that.
But
9 years vegetarian.
Get a grilled cheese.
I could get a grilled cheese.
Because you're eating dairy now, so yeah.
I eat dairy, which I didn't used to. I didn't used to eat dairy.
I'm like calling you out.
I do now. Hey, I'm here for it. Life's an open book. Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't been to In-N-Out in a while. Yeah, but I'll have me some of the fries. Yeah. Or maybe like what is it, like protein style? But if I'm not having the meat, then I want the carbs too.
Yeah, that's a good way to go. Are you an In-N-Out fan, Sara?
I love In-N-Out.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
I love
I'm not the only one.
But to share the burden with Enrique, there's a few things I don't eat, so I'm gluten-free and dairy-free.
Okay, so that makes it a little harder.
Yeah, but I do the protein style. And you just get it without cheese. But then you have to get it to make up for the lack of carbs, you have to, of course, get it animal style.
Of course.
Yeah,
Of
that was
course.
my thing too. I
That is
did eat a
true.
lot of In-N-Out in high school. And
Are the fries
continuing.
gluten-free, or is that like no?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I hope they are, because I've eaten them.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that's been, I mean, obviously, a lot of people are fans of In-N-Out, including my kids. Like, they constantly want to eat there.
Yeah.
And me too, to a degree.
course.
Love the food, but you know, the real interesting thing is in the fast food space. You know, I feel like In-N-Out has really figured out how to be profitable, how to be successful.
Yes.
They provide a very high quality product, a very simple, right, menu.
Right.
And the idea of, you know, once you open an In-N-Out location, the owner of that location has, you know, it's something you just never want to give up. And so the idea of an
Of
In-N-Out
course.
actually closing in a community in California is pretty shocking. And they did cite closing its location due to ongoing issues with crime. Their
Bummer.
customers and associates being regularly victimized.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess it hasn't closed yet, but it's gonna be closing in March. But this is, this is really kind of a sad state of affairs, I think, for California's crime situation, particularly in the Bay Area. And it's yet another example that we've talked about a lot on this podcast
Sure,
of really California going in the wrong direction. So I'm really sad to see that, and sad to see, you know, sometimes there's excuses made about, you know, well, the business was struggling, or, you know, maybe it was other factors, not just crime. But
Yeah.
the reality is this one truly was due
Yeah.
to California's policies and crime. And definitely a concerning trend. So
It's a little bittersweet, you know, and I do know that, as we've mentioned, and now has grown to be almost a staple of California. And it's a bit unfortunate to hear that certain circumstances are the determining factor of why, you know, such a fast food store or location is shutting down.
It's
I'm-
tough for
Yeah.
Oakland too, because I mean you're
It's
talking
been
about
rough for Oakland.
tax revenue. You're talking about obviously In-N-Out for food for
Yeah.
people living in Oakland, so it's tough.
Yeah. I don't think the sports teams recently leaving
Well, the
are a
sports
huge
teams
help
too.
for the
Yeah,
What
city.
I'd be curious about the impact on community, because I know at least where I grew up, after football games, after baseball games,
Yeah.
all the high schoolers would pile into cars, go hang out there, before and after school dances. I mean, it was a big community spot.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
for young people, because it's affordable. So it's a place that young people can go and hang out,
Yeah.
grab a
Absolutely.
bite. So
No,
that's
that's a good
bummer.
point. And I
It
mean,
is.
there's a lot of community impacts anytime a business like this. I mean, they might even sponsor local sports teams. Like, I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
different,
Mhm.
you know, community impacts to that. And so
Yeah.
really unfortunate. But we'll get to in a little bit, we're going to play a clip on some of the things that we're working on to hopefully change some of these trends
Yeah.
in California.
Yeah.
So we'll get there in a few minutes. But the last story I wanted to touch on was this last week, the communities across California started or completed and did their point in time counts for homelessness. So their federally mandated census of the homeless population in California. You know, this really is something that we're not going to know the numbers right away, but is very important to know that it's happened in the
Sure.
in the last week, because this really is what we base, you know, a lot of our numbers on in the state, in the country.
Yeah.
Most recently, the most recent federal numbers have California as being home to 49% of the nation's unsheltered homeless population, which is really, again, a sign of something in our state that needs to be worked on, right? It needs to be addressed. As you guys know, we've spent billions of taxpayer dollars in the last
Yes, we have.
6 years or so to address this problem. And every time we've done a count, our homeless population has gone up.
Mhm.
And I think at this point, it has certainly turned into a crisis that must be addressed, one of public health, one of public safety, and just getting people the help that they need. And so I think it'll be really interesting, and we'll report back soon on
That's very interesting.
the numbers from that count.
Yeah.
But you know, I've been meeting with a lot of my city council members and city managers recently, and this is something that's been on their mind a lot as we
I'm sure it is.
get closer to this count, because it is happening in every committee
course.
in our district and in the state. So
Of course.
going to be an interesting story to follow. Looking ahead a little bit to see what we're going to be talking about over the next few months, I think one of the big discussions is going to be how to address the problems in our insurance market. We have 350,000 Californians now on the FAIR plan, which is the insurance carrier of last resort. You're in Shingle Springs, so you probably know a little more about the FAIR plan, just in terms of it tends to be one of the only options for people that live in high fire hazard areas, right? And this is a crisis that, while it doesn't directly impact my district as, directly, it is growing throughout our state. I mean, this is an insurance plan that was created to be a last resort for homeowners and is now the only option for a lot of people. A lot of people have seen 150% increases in their insurance rates over the past few years as a result of providers leaving the state, and it's just really it's really unfortunate. So I do expect this to be a major topic of discussion between the insurance commissioner and the legislature and the governor this year. We'll definitely be keeping people up to date on that. Enrique, you highlighted this one. I thought this one was kind of fun. So Assemblywoman Kate Sanchez, has introduced a resolution, HR 61, limiting the number of measures legislators can introduce.
That is correct. That is correct. From 50 to 25 for the 2 year of the legislative cycle.
Yeah, so we run on 2-year legislative cycles in California. So right now you can introduce 50 bills.
Correct.
Over that 2-year span, which I don't know, that's a lot of bills. And I think you guys analyze the bills, and so you probably agree it's probably too many bills. Yeah. I have to vote on the bills.
Right.
And it's too many bills, in my opinion. I think we do way too much in the short period of time that we have in session. And there certainly are a lot of really important priorities that we have to address as a state.
Of course. Of course.
This would limit that to 25 over that 2-year span, which I think is still plenty.
Well, I can appreciate the desire of where, the I guess more full legislative packages goes, when it gets to like 25 and 1 year, there are issues out there that need tackling and need chipping away. And I can appreciate that legislators are putting themselves out there to learn about the issues and trying to, put something forward to resolve the matters at hand. You sometimes, though, ask yourself whether there are that many ideas out there for the issues that we have. And I don't have the answers, I don't have the answers. I'm just learning over here. I have 1 year under my belt. But to Assemblywoman Sanchez's point, I would also agree that it could help in reducing, the amount of money that is spent, here in the state.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I started, as an intern many years ago, it was something, I think it was 40 bills per 2-year session. And then they increased it to 50 sometime in the, around 2015 or 2016. I can't remember exactly. And, that was definitely a step in the wrong direction. I'd be happy to go back to 40, even 40. But I mean, to put it in context, we had, I think, over 3,000 bills that we debated last year. In 1 year.
It was record in modern California history. Modern as, I don't know from what year, but it was definitely up there from recent legislation.
It was crazy, and I think about a third of those ended up on the governor's desk, I believe, approximately. And he signed, over 80% of them, I think, into law. So you're talking about 800 to 900 new laws in one single year of the California legislative session. Certainly, some of them may have been very good. I mean, I got a few of my bills signed myself.
Yes, you did.
I'm not saying they were all bad, but it certainly does raise the question of, I mean, do we need 900 new laws in California?
And perhaps with the reduction of the number, maybe we can be more efficient as far as like the resolution for certain issues, and not not spreading yourself too thin.
What has your experience been so far, Sara, on bill analyses and committees?
Yeah, well, you asked earlier about how my experience has been thus far, and something that I think would be helpful to bring up is sort of that information gap
Yeah.
between working in the building and just being a member of the general public. And this is one of those areas. The sheer number of bills
Yeah.
that works its way through the legislature is incredible. It's, nothing that I would have expected. And so with that, the number of bills that we see every day, that you hear on the floor, that you see go through committee with analyses and such. I mean, it's a lot, I wish that there was an opportunity, not everybody can or wants to be a fellow or can or wants to be an intern, but for people in the general
Yeah.
public to spend a day in the building or a week in the building and see just, that the sheer number, and what it's like to work with that and what that means as far as California's spending and the legislators' abilities to get eyes on every bill or for the staff.
Yeah.
It's pretty overwhelming, especially for someone who is new and learning. There's a steep learning curve there to be able to prioritize and manage the bills that you see. So luckily I have a great office who was very helpful and teaching me.
But I think you emphasize a really important point, which is that if you are a member of the general public, and I mean, we as legislators, as staff members, have trouble on our own working in this every day, keeping up with the vast majority of bills.
Yeah.
So imagine what it's like for a member of the general public to even attempt to track or follow, 3,000 bills. It's not possible, right? Like for one person, which is why we have a lot of, organizations that, specialize in different issue areas that send updates to their members and things like that. I mean, that's why you really come together and form these organizations. But when you have a government of that size, really just, I think a government larger than it should be, that is, it becomes very difficult as a member of the public to pay attention to everything.
And keep up,
So-
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why there are literal jobs where you pay someone to advocate and report back to you on policy issues. I mean, big companies will pay for a lobbyist to keep an eye on all of these things and report back on what things are affecting their industries. But every person doesn't have that ability, right? So it's and that's kind of one of the reasons we started this podcast. I mean, we can't talk about 3,000 bills, unfortunately. I think people would fall asleep, but certainly to highlight some of the things that are going on.
And you can't quite blame the public. People have their obligations, people have their responsibilities. They must feed their family, so you can't blame somebody for not being a policy wonk or a politico,
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, and that's and so often I hear from constituents, right? I had no idea this had even passed. I had no idea this had ever become law. I didn't even know this was being proposed, right?
Yeah.
If I had known, I would have participated, right? But there are a lot of things that sneak under the radar if they don't get media attention or if they don't get highlighted somewhere. And so definitely
Absolutely.
important. So this week is our House of Origin deadline for 2-year bills, essentially the bills that it did not get passed in the first year of legislative session last year. This is the last opportunity for them to be passed out of the assembly. Is this week, actually. After this, the Friday after this podcast airs will be the deadline. And so one of the bills I was going to highlight, and again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I did want to at least bring up one, is AB 1299 Jackson, which puts a lot of new restrictions on school resource officers, which are these essentially school police officers. Anyone that's a parent, probably with kids in school, might know what this is already. But a school resource officer is essentially a police officer that school districts generally contract with local PD or some relationship like that to have officers on duty at the schools, keep making sure things are safe and interacting with students in a positive way. And I think I have long been a very strong supporter of school resource officers. This bill started actually as a bill to defund those officers. So essentially, the original version of this bill said that you could not use educational dollars as a school district to contract and have school resource officers. That would have obviously created a lot of problems and taken away a lot of local control
Yeah,
from the
to say the
districts
least.
and the parents and the communities that want these at their schools, want these officers. Thankfully, that version of the bill did not move forward last year, but it has now been kind of pared down to the point where it puts now a bunch of new restrictions on school resource officers, including prohibiting them from correcting pupil behavior and having to seek permission of the school principal before interacting with students, really hampering their ability to, I think, not just keep students safe, because obviously the number one priority for most districts when they employ a school resource officer is to make sure their campus is safe. By the way, not just from outside threats, right? Like a school shooting, God forbid if that were to ever happen, but also from violence that happens on campus. I know when I was a school board member, we had over 300 incidents of violence across our high school and middle school campuses every year. And that was like kind of the average. But, there are things that happen on school campuses that, teachers and administrators really are not in the best place to put themselves in harm's way, right? We have officers that are willing to do the hard work and do that. And that's why a lot of our school administrators really support school resource officers, because if they're not there, then it's up to the teachers and the administrators to actually do that work. And so
they're not trained for that.
Yeah, which it can get really difficult. And so, I'm really disappointed. I'm going to be probably speaking on this bill to encourage my colleagues to not support it. But when you guys went to school, did you have school resource officers, or did you have any?
I sure
experience
did.
with these? You did? Okay.
Well, I went to a continuation school in Fremont,
Okay.
California, because I was a little low with my credit, so I wasn't in line to graduate
All right,
at the designated time. So I went to a continuation school as a way to catch up on my units.
Yeah.
That school was quarter-based as opposed to semester, which
Okay.
my school of origin was. And not to stereotype, but I had peers who didn't always have the best academics,
Sure.
So we had up to 3 officers on campus.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of all spread out the campus. It wasn't a terrible campus, but I have my experience associating and interacting with them.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me, we also had officers on and off campus, periodically. I'm sure they were always there or not too far away. I just didn't always
Sure.
see them. But it was always very reassuring to know that they were there.
Yeah.
There was often, an officer's car parked right outside of the school. And as a student, that's very reassuring. Unfortunately, these
Yeah.
days, whether it's an outside threat, or
Yeah.
something happening within the school with other students,
Yeah.
it's nice to know that when you're walking around campus, there's someone there. I'd be really curious to hear what students have to say about this bill,
Yeah.
and if it affects how they feel about their safety. Unfortunately, these days, if you hear a loud noise or something that might sound like a gun, your first thought might be, is there something going on that I need to be aware of?
Yeah.
And when stuff like that happens, if I'm out in public or at the movie theater, at a grocery store, the first thing I'm doing is seeing if there's a member of law enforcement around.
Yeah.
And I know that was a thing for myself and other students in school and even in college. So again, just advocating for students and their comfort level and their safety. I think it's really important to have, maybe their input on this.
Yeah.
Because it's their experience, it's their ability to learn and stay focused and, let kids be kids and let them, not be needing to have conversations like, what are we going to do because the officer does not have as much discretion as they used to.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And, the interesting, you mentioned the car being out front. That is, that can also act as a deterrent, right, too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyone that would seek to do harm to a school campus or something. So, but understandably, it's a very a big issue. I think locally there are conversations going on, but I think it is a local control issue, and these are conversations that are happening at the local level, and I think that's where they probably should remain. I don't
Absolutely.
think the state has really a role in coming in and telling school districts how they need to function.
Absolutely.
Because, by the way, in my district, for example, we have 3 main school districts. I mean, I touch a few others, but 3 of the big ones in my district all approach school safety a little differently. Some of them contract with school safety, school resource officers. Some of them have their own security teams that are not law enforcement per se, but they have different methods for keeping students safe. And so there are different ways that school districts are doing this, and it kind of just kind of speaks to, hey, let the school districts govern themselves and make those decisions. But
of course, and I always emphasize that I appreciate the sentiment of where such public policy or proposal comes from. To your point, though, I don't necessarily believe that such blanket policy necessarily takes into account the different circumstances that play in different parts of the state.
Yeah, it's interesting too, and I'll just close on this one, and then we'll move to our next section. But it's also about creating positive relationships, right? And I think there obviously have been stories involving members of the community and law enforcement that are not positive, and I think that can create the wrong perception. And so allowing opportunities for positive engagement with law enforcement, I think, is a good thing. I've personally met with a lot of the resource officers in my district that work with students every day and genuinely want to have a relationship with students. They're not there to be punitive. Obviously they're there to keep people safe, but definitely want to have positive relationships. One of the interesting statistics I learned, I mentioned kind of the incidence of violence on campuses. If you don't have a resource officer that has a relationship with a student on campus, administrators call outside law enforcement in. And so you still have police responding to incidents, right? But they're not police or law enforcement that have relationships with students. And so I do think that is always kind of a question that I pose to someone that really wants to see these officers defunded is, well, you're not getting rid of police response. You're simply getting rid of that opportunity for a positive relationship. And so, it's an interesting debate. We will see how that one goes. I expect it to get brought up on the floor this week before the Friday's deadline.
Sounds good.
Moving on to our clip of the week. I'll play this for you guys. Actually, let's see. We had a big press conference last week on AB 1772. Last year, I introduced AB 75, which sought to increase accountability for repeat theft offenders to reform Proposition 47 and get some more consequences and accountability for people that are contributing to the increase in retail theft that we're seeing across California. That bill was voted down in the Public Safety Committee last year, so that was unfortunate. But a very, very similar, almost identical bill has now been introduced by one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, which I'm very thankful for. I look forward to co-authoring that bill with him. And last week we had a press conference announcing that. I'll play this clip real quick.
Great.
I am here in full support of Assembly Bill 1772, authored by Assemblyman James Ramos and the co-authors. This is a common sense, nonpartisan bill that would implement a measure of consequence for repeat shoplifters. Proposition 47 essentially decriminalized retail theft. We regularly see brazen smash and grab thefts in broad daylight by emboldened criminals who have no fear of consequence for their actions. We see it every night on the news. This new normal has devastated many businesses and merchants across the state, and San Bernardino is no exception. In 2020, we had 429 shoplifting reports. In 2023, we saw 1,028. This is an increase of 140%. However, those numbers do not reflect the true damage, since many of the victims have become hopeless and conditioned not to report the thefts because they feel that there's no consequence. Other businesses simply cannot endure the repetitive loss and end up closing their doors for good. When businesses close, communities suffer loss of jobs, loss of valuable services, and loss of revenues. Communities of color are especially harmed when left with retail deserts, additional blight, and increased crime.
So this is actually, so the part of the press conference there was Darren Goodman, who is the chief of police for San Bernardino Police Department, formerly a lieutenant with the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. Also a good friend of mine. We actually went to grad school together. And so it's been really cool kind of keeping in touch with him over the years.
Neat.
And seeing him at this press conference. He spoke along with a number of other sheriffs and law enforcement, as well as, business advocates and legislators, really saying, hey, this is the time to come together in a bipartisan way and address retail theft. And I think this will be a major bill this year, but I don't think it'll be the only bill. I think there will be other pieces of legislation put forward as well. And I'm very, excited to look at all of them and see them move through. But I think it's the first time that we've seen this really get some bipartisan momentum, and I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, one of the tougher pills to swallow from the clip there is when the gentleman said that, some people don't even report on these anymore. People have come to accept the degree of crime and retail theft that, occurs in the state. I have yet to be shopping somewhere and experience it for myself, but I know many people, and my former boss as well, he shared with us that he was shopping with the Sun ones, and it was just in plain sight. So it's become commonplace in the state, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the attention goes to the large retailers. They get, like you hear about the Walgreens closures or the In-N-Out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not necessarily retail theft, but it's crime in general. But you hear about Walgreens closing, and, he mentioned retail deserts that get created from that happening. Large companies like Nordstrom or, Target, Walmart, these types of stores. And, they definitely get a lot of the attention, but what doesn't get a lot of the attention is the small businesses that are impacted by this, that those losses impact them in a much greater way, even than the large retailers, right? I had a meeting recently in the district with a bunch of retail business owners in one of the shopping areas in Folsom who have lost, thousands of dollars in merchandise as a result of just everyday shoplifting crime that really, law enforcement and the DAs are struggling to hold those people accountable because their hands have been tied by Proposition 47. And they want assistance, they want help. They want that to change, and a lot of them have shut their doors, and the ones that are still open are having to struggle with those decisions, because if you're losing a few $1,000s in merchandise as a small business, that is just a devastating loss, right?
It's your livelihood.
To your livelihood.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Looking forward to working on that this year.
I'm hopeful that we're gonna, find a solution to this in the near future.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not another reason that people keep leaving California. I have plenty of friends and family who have cited the rise in crime as just an additional reason that they've started to look elsewhere. I mean, my community where I'm from is very small and very small business driven. And you have a lot of people who that is where they get their livelihood, or maybe that's their first job out of high school. And just the effect it has on community and community morale, and people wanting to raise their families or start a business. It has a big impact. It has a big butterfly effect on how and where people decide to establish their lives. So.
For sure.
At the very least, it's cause for optimism to see that all hands are deck in the legislature.
Yeah. No, and we'll see. I think time will tell. I don't want to be overly optimistic. I am an optimistic person, but I've also seen efforts like this falter, and I think yes, I think this may be a year. There's also I think there's a proposition collecting signatures right now, a ballot initiative, I should say, collecting signatures to get on the ballot in November I think it recently reached over 200,000 signatures.
Wow.
And so there is that is actually a big development, because if there is an initiative looming, it very oftentimes creates leverage on the legislature to take action. Because now in California, you can actually pass a bill and remove an initiative from the ballot.
Yes.
So there is a negotiation that can take place there.
Correct.
It hasn't always worked that way. It's only been the last few years where that's been possible. And so because of that leverage and that negotiation that will be taking place, with law enforcement groups and retailers and things like that, I think the legislature will have a lot of incentive or pressure, maybe is a better way to put it, to take action. And exactly, whatever it takes, I'm open to it.
Absolutely.
So I will be strongly supportive of those efforts, whatever they look like, to address this crisis. Last thing, I have to talk about this briefly, because we always try to talk about something fun at the end.
All right.
I went to the 49ers playoff
Yes, you
game.
did.
Okay?
Go Niners.
On
Yes, you
Sunday.
did.
All right. And that's why my voice is like terrible today, because I think I yelled so much. It was insane. So my dad and my son and I, it was cool. Like 3 generations. We went down
That's
there.
awesome.
It was a
Santa
good game to
Clara.
go to.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So the first half, they were down 24-7, and we were all regretting our decision to spend the money to go to this game. And I'm like halftime walking around, and the Lions fans were just going crazy, and
I'm sure.
like, this is like Christmas, and isn't this amazing? We're gonna win, blah blah blah. And I mean, granted, they haven't been to the playoffs in like a very, very long time, like 30 years or something. So I understand, as a Kings fan, I understand how painful it is to have a struggling franchise. But yeah, and then it all changed in the third quarter, and like all the momentum shifted away from the Lions. And
talk about a comeback.
And they brought it back and won the game. So Super Bowl bound, very exciting.
They're in. They're in.
So it'll be fun. Are you guys football fans at all?
I can't say I'm the biggest football fan, but as somebody from the Bay Area, I'm all in for the Niners. Absolutely,
right,
absolutely. If we're talking about baseball, though, which is still San Francisco, go Giants.
That's right. Yeah, go Giants.
Go Giants all
like
the way.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up going to games with my dad.
Nice.
So he'd always try to go to a game with me for my birthday. But that was back when they were at Candlestick Stadium.
I remember.
For those who are familiar.
Yeah.
Now they're just that much further.
Yeah.
That I don't think we've made it to a game since they moved. But we still watch. I watched the game this Sunday.
Very cool.
It was really sad and then really exciting.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's funny. I was telling my son, because the Santa Clara Niner Stadium is right next to Great America, like the theme park,
is.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I used to
And
go
so you
there
can
once.
see it from the seats, right? Because we were in the upper level, and I was joking with him. I'm like, we're staring at these roller coasters, and we're riding an emotional roller coaster, because it was so like emotionally up and down. It was like,
that's really funny, actually.
As a fan, right? You're just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And the Lions fan, I was literally sitting next to these 2 guys from Detroit, and
Wow.
I actually felt like a little bad. Not that we won, but just I felt like it was almost worse that they went up by 17 and then lost the lead. It was almost more painful to lose that way than if you had just gotten beat from the beginning.
There, man. It was right there.
And these guys from Detroit next to me, really nice guys, but they were melting down, like emotionally.
That's
they were
rough.
Like they were going through different stages of grief. Like sometimes they'd be quiet, just kind of rocking back and forth, like, upset about what was going on the field, or they would be like, we had it in hand, or like, this is what it's like being a Lions fan, and blah, all these years of failure, and there's a lot of stages going on there, and I really felt for him.
I'm sure they had a bit worse of a roller coaster at the end of the game of emotions.
Their ride home was a little worse than mine, and it was longer than mine too. So
I know.
That's true.
It was really sad to invest all that to come out. But yeah, so looking forward to the Super Bowl. We'll see.
I'll tune in.
See what happens. Like, it's the Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes. You can never count that guy out. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to watch. But we'll wrap it there. Thank you guys for coming on today, and just being being awesome guests, given our scheduling conflicts and stuff. I'm sure we'll have to do this again because
happy to.
Yeah.
I know this is going to happen from time to time where we just can't get a legislator in here to hang out. So with that, if you have any ideas for future shows, pointoforderpod@gmail.com. And then you can follow the podcast on YouTube or social media at pointoforderpod, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. And then you can also follow today's host on Twitter I'm at Joshua_Hoover. And what is yours, Enrique? It's at Enrique
_ Libertas. Like liberty, but AS at the end.
Okay. All right, cool. So if you want to follow along, that's how you can do it. Really appreciate you guys coming on, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.